Hey, here we are. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to our, literally, it is a secret podcast. I mean, other people like to use the term secret podcast, secret this, secret that. This is really a secret. First of all, it's Asian American. It's Filipino. It's got to be a secret. Do you know about that? No, I don't know about that. I had never heard about that. Here we are. And it's kind of a sad day for me. I'm gonna try not to make it too sad a day. I'm gonna make this into a reflective weekend when I think about what happened 10 years ago, and then we're gonna talk about what happened. We're gonna talk about what happened this week. Professor Dan Gonzalez will be here with us, San Francisco State University, Professor Emeritus, Asian American Studies, College of Ethnic Studies. We're going to talk about what we're dealing with now with campus unrest. It actually, you bring in the cops, it gets bigger, right? I mean, instead of dealing with the wound, you bring in the cops and you actually are expanding on the problem. I mean, that's what we're seeing. So we'll talk to Professor Dan about that coming up. Talk about the alternatives that could have been used but did not happen. Professor Dan from 50 years ago, do you think it could work? And maybe we'll talk about Biden. Although if you go to Emil Amok's Takeout 681, we talk about we play Biden's statement. It may not help, and we may get in this. We may be in this situation now where it's a thing. Campus unrest is a thing, and it could derail Biden's reelection plan. So we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about the Hope Hicks testimony, the Trump trial. I mean, she's sort of like the last thing on a Friday, so that as people think about the Trump trial, if you're thinking about the Trump trial, you should be thinking about the Trump trial. At least going to the highlights and seeing what people say about what's happening and what's at stake, because this is important. Because now you see the campaign issues really materialize day by day, and it's not really inflation. It's not really the fact that someone's older than another person. It really is campus unrest as connected to the global concern with Israel and Gaza, and the criminality of the man who wants to be president for a second time. So all that we're talking about today on Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We go live here on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. We also go live on Twitter and on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. We do it on a daily basis to talk about the news and because we can. Actually, that's the reason why we do it, because we can. But also because there are voices. There are Asian American voices, Filipino American voices on the news. This is what we're feeling. This is what we're dealing with. You know, it's also Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we will tie it all in because this is our month, right? This is our month to crow. This is our month to talk about things. And so that's another reason why we do this, because it's especially useful on Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And if you go to my ALDEF blog, my column there, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog, you'll see, you know, we really should be talking about Arabs as Asians. And, well, all Middle Eastern people. That means all Turkic people. That means Palestinians. That means Israelis. That means every one of them, right, should be, by rights, by geographical, ethnographical rights, they're Asians. And we should vet them all Fet, like have a festival. Fet them all this month of May. It's important, and not leave them out. And in my blog post on the AANHPI blog, I talk about why the Arabs used to be Asian American, or used to be considered Asian, but how suddenly why they shifted to white. I mean, everyone talks about, oh, well, people are, you're ethnic and then you're white. Like the Italians used to be white, or used to be Italians, now they're white. The Irish used to be, considered just Irish, and now they're white. Everyone goes through this transition in America. And for the Arabs turned white around 1909. But by rights, they should be Asian, right? And there are some who say, look, we want our own designation. But, we aren't really as white as we could be or should be in terms of how we're treated. And they want to be Asian. The Arabs, they align themselves with Asian Americans because their experience is closer to the people of color communities. So Arabs are out there, while some say, look, let's get this census thing right and let's call ourselves something that makes sense, like Middle Eastern, North Africans. But there are some who gladly join Asian Americans in groups like the Asian American Journalists Association. I mean, that's how I met a lot of Arab American journalists in Dearborn, Michigan, when the AAJA had a convention there. So an interesting perspective on AANHPI month. If you go to my blog post and you'll get that story about how Asian Americans, or how Arab Americans were Asian, but then suddenly in 1909 they said, hey, wait a minute. We could fight discrimination if we were all white. I mean, that's sort of the message. And they fought for their whiteness. And they won. They won. That's how they're white. The Arabs. Lebanese in particular. We could be feting Marlo Thomas and Danny Thomas. That's a generational thing, I think. But really, we should be looking at things like the Israel-Gaza conflict as Asian Americans and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we are the conduit to peace because we're talking about Asian brothers and sisters here. West Asian. Asians only north, south, central, east, not West Asian. When you say Asian American, you're talking about a big geographical concept here. But you need to know that. And so I shared the story about how Arabs became not Asian American as West Asians, but white. Go to the AANHPI post. Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. All right. We got the swish going. Okay, we're gonna play the swish. The transition back and forth. The forward and back. Feels good. The swipe, the good swipe, not the kind of dating type app swipe. This is the good kind of swipe. I was reading somewhere where 40% of all relationships start now in the modern times through dating apps. That is incredible. But I mean, where are you going to meet people? If that's your goal, if you're going to meet people in the modern day, so that's kind of interesting. I guess even for like older folks, if you're single, although if you're a single older folk, I saw something in the New York Times where, the rise, the biggest problem with the seniors these days, STIs, for you promiscuous seniors out there. article in the Times. Of course, so if it's in the Times, you know it must be true. All right. All right, so now let's get serious just for a second. We'll bring up Professor Dan in a second. I want to talk about an alum of San Francisco State, my cousin. I call him my cousin. He called me uncle. But in fact, he was my second cousin once removed. He's my father's brother's son. Father's brother, son. All you genealogists out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's second cousin once removed. Father's brother's son. Stephen Guillermo. This is 10 years after Stephen was shot and killed. I say shot and murdered because that's what he was. Or shot and executed because that's what he was. It was a legal killing in California. A legal killing. How can that be, Emil? Well, the story goes on May 2nd, a Friday, 10 years ago, out carousing, having a good time with friends, celebrating his impending graduation from San Francisco State. Stephen goes home past midnight, goes up to his South of Market apartment. It's not, it's right there, Mint Mall. You know what it's like. It's where a lot of people come. If you were there early, you got a cheap rent. It's not cheap anymore. Apparently, they've raised some prices. But every floor looks the same. Every apartment is kind of cookie cutter. He was drunk. He lived on the 5th floor. He got off on the 3rd. He thought it was his floor, his apartment. He goes down the hall. He tries to enter an apartment. On the other side of the door of the apartment he tries to enter is an African immigrant, part-time security guard, 68-year-old guy. We know him. He's identified as a security guard. He knows some of the laws. He has a little 22 special, a little handgun. He sees someone trying to open his door. Stephen is drunk, saying, hey, open, this is his apartment, right? Come on. He thinks it's his apartment. He tries to go in. And maybe he breaks in, or maybe he was let in because the security guard knows how to manipulate the laws. Hey, I can shoot this guy. The law says I can shoot an intruder if he crosses the threshold, if he comes in, if I don't know this person, I can shoot this person legally. And so Stephen Guillermo entered, was an intruder, legally an intruder, and was shot dead. Didn't take much. 1, 2 shots, dead. The man who shot him turned himself in, spent 3 nights in jail, was released because the law does not allow for them to hold this suspect. No longer a suspect if they let him go. Well, maybe he's still a suspect, but he's not charged. I talked to my friends who cover crime, and they said, DA will never touch this case. And they were right. I tried to do what I could. I went before the Board of Supervisors. I went before the police commission. I went before the media. I tried to call attention to this case. How could it be that a 27-year-old immigrant from the Philippines, about to graduate from San Francisco State, how is it that he can lose his life and there are no repercussions? But that is how you can legally kill anyone in America. California law tried to change California law. Oh, you want to change the homicide laws in America, in California, Emil? My friends who are in high places were nice to me and said, shook their heads, and they were polite, but it was a pie in the sky thing. We weren't going to change the laws. I talked to the DA and said, why? The DA who was fond of like changing marijuana laws and drug laws to let more people out. Okay, that's a political thing. But I said, why can't you do something for my cousin? And he said, Emil, this is one guy. One guy. And apparently that wasn't enough to get justice in San Francisco, California, in the United States. One guy. That's what he said. That guy who's the DA in San Francisco who talked to me, he's now DA in Los Angeles, and not terribly. I mean, I don't think he's doing a great job there either. My point is, we were stuck with really no hope. And so it's really a bittersweet thing. You come to a 10-year anniversary and you say, well, what can you do? And unfortunately, not much. What can you do? It's just that you live with the pain of knowing that they caught the murderer and then they let him go. And then they could do nothing about it. And the family has lived with that loss for 10 years. That's most painful. What's even more painful is when you consider 10 years of my cousin's life that could have been, that really should have been. I mean, I talk about him and I show him. I mean, one of the last pictures that he shared with me on Facebook, I mean, he was up there at watching a Giants game, liked to wear his like painted on Giants eye black. He liked to wear his like Giants. Tim Lincecum was his favorite Giant. He had his Lincecum jersey. And I remember, I just remember communicating with him several times on the internet saying, hey, Stefan, we ought to, let's get together for a game. I'd only see him at the left. He worked at Pier 39. I'd only see him periodically. Less so when he was older, more so when he was younger, when he came as just a young kid. So I think about, wow, he would have been 37. Who knows what kind of life he would have had. His brothers and sister have gone on to do, live their lives. I think about his mom. His father passed away. And I felt especially close to him and his siblings after his father passed away, because there we were at his deathbed saying goodbye, and they were just kids. So I felt kind of close to Stefan. But he was a 27-year-old guy, right? I mean, so he's an adult, makes his own decisions. And he made a mistake on Friday, May 2nd into May 3rd, 2014, went to the wrong apartment, got shot. And there was no recourse. So I think about Stefan today, and I'll be thinking about him all this weekend. And maybe I'll write about it. But I think the saddest thing is that we missed out on what Stefan could have done with his life. He would have been 37 now. We missed out on that. We missed out on him sharing, or us sharing with him, all the things that have happened in our lives. And we just find ourselves with this situation where a man is dead, a man is murdered, a man is killed, and nothing can be done. That is so you have the murderer, you know who he is, you let him go, you look to the skies for, you say, this is an accident. It's an accident. I mean, I can see you drive in a car and you get in a crash and you might, it's a fatal crash. Oh, that's an accident. But still, there's some recourse. I mean, was the other driver drunk? Was it simply an accident? You just ran into a tree or something? It's just hard. It's just hard to deal with it, even still, 10 years later. Anyway, to Stefan. Sorry we didn't make that Giants game. There's this Giants jersey. So I'm thinking about Stefan this weekend. Stefan Guillermo would have been 37 years old. All right, let's swish out for the meantime. All right. So, Stefan, I'll be talking about that on Monday, probably in my columns. But now let's talk about the matter at hand. Earlier this week, or last week, I talked to Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, a veteran of the San Francisco State strike 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. And I asked him, is there a way out of this? And he told me, I wrote about it. It was in Inquirer.net. It was in diverse issues for higher education. And then, of course, Columbia failed the democracy test. They didn't listen to what Dan had to say. They went in, sent the police in, and now we've got this wound is now pussing over. It's like you bring in the police and it's worse. So let's bring in Professor Dan. Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez. Hi, Dan.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to see you. And so, Dan, we tried to give good advice to people last week about what to do with this student uprising, but they didn't listen. They sent in the police. I mean, look, even after, now you might say, because it provides cover, as soon as the protesters in Columbia took over the building and committed acts of vandalism, they gave the administration cover to go in and send in the police. But
Yep.
even at
And last week we discussed that probability.
But even at that point,
I made that point that it's going to happen, and you have to try to do self-policing, but that's essentially an impossible task when you have, open campus borders, right? The whole place isn't completely fenced off. And then as soon as people see protests form, unfortunately, people who uh, practice what we called violent anarchism come out and they do destructive activities. That happened several times at Berkeley over the last 10 years with demonstrations against protesting right wing speakers being brought out to their campus. And what started out as peaceful protests and picketing suddenly becomes destructive activity in the evening with a group called the Black Bloc. Actually, breaking windows, doors, throwing stuff around, and it was even more violent than that, at least physically, at UCLA in the dead of night. The attacks by pro-Israeli people against the protesters began at around 12:30, 1 o'clock that night, and the police didn't show up for almost 2 hours. It was over an hour and 40 minutes before they showed up.
Yeah,
They were getting seriously beaten. Fireworks were being thrown into the encampment.
So what I was wondering about that, because the reports all through the night until I mean, always question where was the
Yep,
police presence, and
that's
it was
right.
almost like they looked the other way on purpose. What do you suppose? There's got to be some kind of investigation on.
Well, I don't want to allege that without proof, but it was questionable.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons was that if there is a reason for slow behavior by the police, it's because they may have been told we like to keep the police off campus and we'll try to handle it ourselves as long as it remains peaceful. But I think they should have had a ready force available. They should have had at least some small ready force available in case something like that happened.
Well,
So
where was the campus cops? The campus
yeah,
cops
that's what I'm saying.
there too.
Yeah, they
I
should have
mean,
had a ready force because they could have interfered with that attack by pro Israel, especially when they had weapons.
yeah.
They had
All right.
they had long weapons, not just batons and sticks. There were at least one or two guys that had long weapons that looked like either spears or uh, yeah, staffs.
Yeah.
A long staff, and it's kind of hard to hide that. It's kind
Well,
of they just walked on the campus and had that stuff, and nobody said anything, or there were no nominal security police available because
well,
they when situations like that arise. I know at SF State they get it all out. They have all calls, and then they police the buildings.
yeah.
And during the SF State strike way back in 68, 69, they even during the evenings they would have cops patrolling the area to make sure that nobody was planting bombs or setting fires or doing any of that stuff. So this was suspicious. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Well, all right. So we can't make any full allegations, but we know what we saw, and we know in it.
It was slow. It was
Yeah.
slow, and it was that hated word unacceptable. God, am I tired of hearing that?
Yeah. Well, it's like where were the cops at 1 o'clock at 12? What were they doing? Were
Yeah,
they shift change? I
hour
mean,
and a half.
yeah. It just
Hour and a half went by, and the ABC 7 in L.A. had the chopper up,
yeah.
and
Well, yeah.
and the reporter in the chopper was saying, "I've never seen anything like this. Look at all this. Look how heavy the violence is." And then somebody else, on one of the on one of the social media sites, was also commenting over this and saying, "This guy right here, this guy with the red bandana." So you could identify these people. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was kind of appalled when I saw that, but it all started once Columbia went in with the cops, and that was like if one situation in UCLA had no cops, at Columbia they had all the cops there,
yeah,
and it was
yeah,
almost like overkill, and it was like I couldn't believe it because, as I said, we talked about this last week, and we said that there still had to be a way to continue talking, even if, well, that's the question now. Even if the building was breached and it was occupied, there still could have been talks, productive talks, to prevent what happened at Columbia, to prevent the police coming in. But it seems
well,
like they
yeah,
gave up.
back in '69, we said it's not us. It's not just us. There's a lot of people coming on board, and the news media kept on saying that there were outside agitators. That was a favorite phrase back then, right?
Yeah.
Whenever the right wanted to say that something got out of control, but it's not local people, they would use the words outside agitators. In the South, they used that constantly to impugn the integrity of civil rights workers, particularly people who were trying to register folks to vote, right? In the mid '60s, I'd call them outside agitators, and the general public would then favor harsh police action, including violent action, right?
So you're saying this is goes back historically, this
Yes.
idea of the outside agitator.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah, I mean, I've heard
absolutely.
this is not the first time I heard it myself, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know it goes back to the civil rights era too.
Well, it might even go back to the Civil War era. That's I've seen. That phrase used back during the First World War for sure, in terms of people complaining about the need for the U.S. to act on what was happening in Europe. And at the time, there was a conservative isolation movement that held the majority interest in Congress and in the general public at the time.
Yeah. Well, I just wondered about that. The Wall Street Journal had a big thing about outside agitation. So
Yep.
that
Yeah.
it's like a phrase that you say it and it turns people conservative. It turns people into
Well, I think it's conservative people that use it first.
yeah, but it
It's
makes
the right
people
that uses it first. They
it,
love to do that,
yeah,
right?
and it turns people into these law and order
That's right.
fanatics as opposed to what if, and this is my what if question to you, if they allowed the occupants to stay, maybe charge them rent or something, but continue talking. They could
Yeah,
have. There's no reason to stop talking. That
yeah.
the occupiers were saying how frustrated they were that the administration stopped talking to them after they had some negotiations, and the administration was just looking for an excuse to go in. They found it. They got the excuse. They went in, as opposed to keep talking. They could have kept talking, right? Right, Dan?
Well, I don't know. I don't know which facts to believe.
Oh, oh, he froze. Unfreeze. Oh, Dan. Dan, you're frozen. So, yeah, you froze again, Dan. Well, Daniel Phil, our friend, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, might have to go away and come back. I don't know, take you out and then maybe bring you back in. In? No, he's frozen. Frozen, Dan. You're going to have to call back. Call back on the Emil line. Yeah, he's going to come back. But that is the case. Though they didn't have to go in. The administration didn't have to call in the cops. In fact, there are other schools that have, they went through negotiations. They may have hit a snag, but they continued on. And there are at least 4 schools that negotiated in good faith. I said in my column that ran in Inquirer.net, INQUIRER.net, and also in diverse issues in higher education. I said everything would be fine if we're dealing in good faith, if we're speaking and negotiating in good faith. And it was clear Columbia was looking for an out. That's why in my column I said Columbia failed the democracy test, because what they really wanted was not to get to the goal of the students, not to get to an answer. They wanted their damn graduation. They can have their graduation, but as some professors at Columbia, as some observers have noted, there are more important things than a graduation. I know that it's the universities, it's really their primary function, right? To facilitate learning in a positive way from the beginning to the end, and the end is graduation. So time to celebrate. I don't think there's any celebration now. You got a police presence till May 17th. The police will be there. I don't know if many celebrants will be there, but I just think that it was a test put to the Columbia administrators, and they failed. They failed. Now, they tried to do some things that other schools were trying to do, through mediation, like maybe putting it up for a vote. That's what they did at Brown. They said, we're not going to go for divestiture or divestment. In fact, they rejected divestment, but said, look, let's put it up to a vote. Let's start the process. There was a similar thing going on in Columbia, but Columbia, the strikers there didn't want that. They wanted more. But you get a yes. To get to yes, you get through a lot of no's. Columbia wasn't willing to do that, but they were willing to do that at Brown. And at Brown, you don't have the news story, the massive arrests. You might have some, or I don't know what the arrest number, but it's now more than 2,300 across the country. And I think when Columbia sent in the cops, that was the message to everyone else. Send in the cops. This is the way. When Greg Abbott in Texas sent in the cops, you knew that, oh, well, it's Greg Abbott. It's Texas. That can't be the way. But when Columbia sent in the cops, then you knew, oh, it must be okay. It's not. Like I said, there were four campuses: Northwestern, Minnesota, Rutgers, and Brown. They tried to do it the right way. They tried to do it in a way where they did not press the panic button, send in the cops. And now you got a compromise. You got a working compromise. But the point for everyone to understand is divestment takes a long time. You don't get to divestment overnight. You got to build trust. You got to build some kind of understanding. And you don't even know where all the investments are, because the way they're listed, they're in some kind of, they're in a private equity fund. They're in something like that. So it's going to take a long time. And so now we got Dan back in here. Dan, hi, Dan. So
Sorry, man, I don't know what's happened.
that's right. So I'm talking about how it was going to take a long time. Columbia didn't give it time.
Oh yeah, that's one of the problems with the goals. We talked about what kind of goals the students. We asked the question anyway. What are
Yeah.
their goals? I don't even. And they did say we want
Yeah.
divestiture, right? And I think in the article that you wrote last week, not this recent one, but you stated that it took a long time for the divestiture to occur with regard to South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
It's a it's a workable strategy,
Yeah. But
and
you need patience.
you do.
And see, here's the thing. As I mentioned just while you were gone a second ago, Columbia wasn't willing to give up its graduation. They showed no patience at all. And I think that was the problem. They were on a tight little, okay, we got 2 weeks before graduation. You guys got to get out, and I think you have to give up the idea of a standard graduation if you're in negotiations. I mean, it was like a total, I think it was a breach of good faith on the part of Columbia. They did not, they could have, but they didn't really negotiate in good faith. And
Yeah, you got to think. See, with the big private institutions, particularly the Ivy League institutions, you got to think in terms of their donor base and some of the people who, I mean, the cost of going to those institutions means that at least half of the population, right, who are paying their own way to attend the school, are really of upper class background. A lot of the Ivy League schools, particularly Harvard, pride themselves in having scholarships and loans and grants available
more than
for people.
50%, more than
Yeah,
50% of the people are on some
yeah,
pay.
yeah, and they have done that, and it grew a lot, over the last 40 years or so. But now they've gotten rid of DEI, they've gotten rid of affirmative action, and as we commented several months ago, right when that issue was settled by the U.S. Supreme Court, uh, we asked the question: is Harvard going to post their data so that we can see how many people of color, what ethnicities are attending Harvard? And to this day, they have not.
Yeah, yeah, they haven't. So,
So,
so I,
so what I warned was, and we were very predictive in discussing this, was that how do the people who filed the lawsuit and won this fight, how do they know they're winning?
Yeah. Well, yeah, they don't know they're winning, and I just think that if they kept talking, you would have had some kind of you would have had a graduation, but you wouldn't have had 200 arrests at Columbia, and maybe you would have posed a new model for people because there are, like I said, there are at least four campuses: Minnesota, Rutgers, Brown, Northwestern that continue talking and avoided the kind of you know police coming in and violence
Yeah,
erupting,
yeah.
and it's sad that everyone is so quick to push the autocratic authoritarian button, which they did in so many campuses. I mean there were peaceful like Fresno State had a very peaceful demonstration.
SF State too.
Yeah.
You know, SF State's got an encampment, and I was going to go visit today, but had a couple of issues I had to deal with at home here, so I'll go tomorrow.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I think it's important to know that there was a way to remain peaceful because as long as people understood that you weren't going to get to the goal of divestment overnight. And if that was the case, then, I think the administration was still dead set in Columbia, that Columbia was dead set on having that graduation. But here's what happened. As soon as Columbia sent in the cops, not only did it spark off other campus, actions like UCLA.
right.
And there's a difference. UCLA is public. They should have been
Yeah.
better than Columbia, which is private. I mean, the idea of free speech has its limits on whether it's private or public campus, but it also has limits on whether you're inciting, some kind of, you know, violence or, there. It's a nuanced sense of free speech. It's not absolute. But here's what happened, not just domestically, but now you're seeing globally the
Yeah.
Israel Hamas Israel Gaza thing. It's the global protest in campuses is happening. Paris had a big protest. It's spreading throughout the world, and I think because I wondered last week, boy, Blinken was over in Israel trying to negotiate for a ceasefire. I said
Mhm.
it's strange. It's strange that what Blinken does, right? The world stage is going to determine what happens, at the campus
That's
level.
right.
Which seemed to me like, wow, it that seemed like almost too big a jump. But we're getting to that point where people now see that yes, in fact, what happens on campus is linked to what's happening in the global stage, and vice versa. And now we're talking about a real problem. It's not just a domestic problem, it's a real problem for Joe Biden if he wants to get elected
Here we go.
or reelected.
That's been one of my major concerns. This ends up being potentially a greater influence on the voting mentality, right, of the younger generation, of the voting age, the youngest of the voting age generation. People 18 to 25, let's say,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
Or
particularly college educated.
you can go to 30, 18 to 30, 18 to 34, because I think, that's generally the demographic, but of millennial, Gen Z. And I know a lot of young people who, like, you mentioned Biden now, and it's like you're talking about the devil, no matter what race,
Yeah,
no matter
yeah,
what race,
yeah.
black,
Uh, I was at a couple of events on campus at SF State in the last 2 months, and I think it's been about 6 weeks since the first one that I attended, and it was pretty mild. I mean, there were criticisms there, and there were people in this small group of about 50 students who were clearly critical of U.S. policy. But I heard a lot of the, let's say, uh, questionable positions taken by some of the students who were willing to speak out. And one of them was the false equivalency kind of statement, like both parties have failed us. The
Yeah.
U.S. has got no business in Israel, and what do you mean they don't have any business in Israel? If you want to stop Netanyahu, the way to do it is to deny him armament and supplies,
Oh, yeah.
unless he changes his tactics, and unless he gets those generals to back off, get the IDF under control. That's going to be a very difficult thing to do, and I don't think, even though students now know a little bit more about this history of
Mm.
oppression and suppression that Palestinians have suffered ever since the existence of Israel.
Yeah.
That's the reality, right? That's the reality. It's been 75 years, and so they understand that history, and unfortunately, because of the overwhelming imbalance of power between the Israeli government and Palestinians, it's a very, very negative history from the Palestinian perspective, or even from an objective perspective. And so students now are aware of that. They're much less aware of the fact that there were critical moments in Israel's history when they were much more balanced and much more willing to accept, for example, a movement towards two-state solutions.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be seen as a coincidence that it was under democratic presidencies that those movements towards the probability, or I'm sorry, the possibility of a two-state solution were actually moved. We didn't get close, but people at least accepted and acknowledged the possibility that could happen. Since then, it's been an absolute negation on the part of the Israeli government and Israeli leadership, and instead we have the rise of right-wing extremists, and we have continuous settler reoccupation and new occupations in the West Bank.
Yeah. And all at the same time, the Israel has built up its military because of the U.S.
That's
because
true.
of the U.S. Support. And so when Netanyahu is looking around at guidance, he should be turning to Biden or turning to the U.S. and saying, "What do I do?" And he should be listening, because he is beholden to U.S. interests. He is beholden to the U.S. military, and that was something that we knew back in
Yeah,
October.
but he's not. He's not, and that's one of the reasons that students are so militantly
Yeah,
opposed. That's one of the exact reasons. If he does not listen, and clearly there's no indication that he will. And in point of fact, many commentators are saying he needs to keep the war going, because he knows that once that stops, he's going to be vulnerable to judicial attack. That
sure.
he's going to be vulnerable to prosecution.
Yeah, and Netanyahu really is just the Israeli Trump, right? He needs the
Uh,
war to keep
yeah.
from going, keep from going to jail, or keep him getting, for his political life. Just like Trump needs to be elected to keep from being
Sure. So
indicted. Or
he can stop the DOJ and
right,
stop the Attorney General and do
right,
all of that other stuff. Yeah, if this people keep saying it's going to be a close election, I hope it's not. But
be a close
uh,
election.
if it is, and it means that Trump could win, and if a lot of the younger voters don't vote, which I think is a possibility. We've been hearing for over a year now that younger African American men and younger Latino voters are very critical, and some of them are moving to vote for Trump. I really, I can't, I can't understand that. I
Eh,
really want to talk to
You know,
some people.
I
Have,
think it's
have you seen interviews of
I think it's the free
are-
Trump sneakers or something. They're getting free sneakers. They're getting. I
yeah,
actually
I can
a
see
lot
them saying being critical of Biden and not wanting to vote for Biden. Okay, I can see
yeah,
that, but I
yeah.
can't see turning to Trump. I
I can't see it either. But there is a segment of the rap population, uh, you know, they have turned they Kanye West, right?
oh man,
I mean, I'm just saying that there was a reason why Trump had his sneaker line, and that was to get the young voter, and maybe he's giving out more free speakers. The
That
free,
well,
the
that stuff was so freaking déclassé and racist. You
yeah,
know, I mean, if that was his rationale, man,
yeah.
you know, and
Well, all right, but see now, this is the thing. A lot of people are going to, like you said, they might stay home. The younger people, they're turned off by Israel Gaza, but Israel Gaza is an overall issue now,
that's
much
right.
more so that for all demographics. But the demographic that is more volatile and that that Biden really needs is this young vote,
He
and they're
does.
we're already talking about just blacks and Latinos abandoning him. But now, if you have all the young vote abandoning him,
Yeah.
that's a big cushion that he had in the past that he won't have, and it
Yeah.
could be enough. It could be enough to to make the race closer than it needs to be.
Well, you know, this we've been talking about this problem, right, with the younger vote, and this generational divide, or what appears to be a generational divide. I mean, that's nothing new, right? The 50s and 60s were all about generational divide, very clearly, right? Um, and that the nature of the division was both deep and wide, right? Right now, it's becoming deep, and my worry is that it's going to become wide, is particularly in terms of timing, right? The closer we get, the more serious the depth of the divide, and the closer we get to the election, the
Mm.
greater the possibility of Biden's loss. Okay,
Right.
that's where it's at.
Yeah, it's like the only thing that could keep it from getting wider. I mean, deep, I can understand. Wider, you want to prevent it from going wider across the demographic
That's
spectrum.
right.
But the only thing that might keep it at bay, the antidote, the antidote that will help is remembering January 6th. If you
Well,
remember
it's not
January
bad.
6th, and if you remember the violence of January 6th, you will know that, I mean, even before a trial comes up, even if the January 6th trial doesn't come up, if that gets delayed, if you think of January 6th and you think of, I mean, we're going to probably get a verdict on this, on the New York case, on the hush money case, right? At some point before the election, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, they're moving at a pace. So if you have the hush money trial and you see what Trump was willing to do to prevent, to try to, this is his way of rigging the election by keeping information away from voters.
Sure.
You include that with January 6th and the images of what did Trump do as president, because people forget. People are now saying, "Oh, what a wonderful president Trump! He actually did a better job than President Biden." But you mean January, you're including
which
January
which is
6th?
which is objectively not only ridiculous, right? It's
Yeah,
it's it's nearly insane. You
yeah,
know, I mean,
oh
it's
yeah.
nearly insane.
Well, he had a Muslim ban. Oh yeah, and he took mothers away from their babies. Oh, these are great Trump accomplishments.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we want to
And he
honor these
said,
Trump
oh,
accomplishments.
and he said, he denied, Mr. Putin denies that it was anything to do with election interference, and I have no reason to believe otherwise.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just go back to Helsinki
Yeah.
when Trump and Putin were out
Sure.
there. The bromance was brewing, and you
Oh,
could say, "Wow, is this not
Shakespeare,
an embarrassment?"
methinks thou doth protest too much.
Yeah.
Remember when he was saying,
Well,
collusion, collusion, collusion,
yeah,
collusion, collusion, collusion. That's all
yeah,
they're saying. Russian
yeah,
collusion, collusion.
yeah. It was funny, but like I said,
I
Helsinki.
was like,
If people do a search for Helsinki, Putin and Trump, that was like a low point in American international affairs, and it's only sunk even further.
oh
And so,
yeah, it was really bad. Wanted to
yeah,
get out of NATO and stop funding United Nations. Those are
yeah,
two biggies,
yeah,
and
and we got to use,
that's really kind of Republican consistency, though.
yeah,
I mean, Republicans have been consistently critical of NATO, Less so lately because they got the crap scared out of them when Trump looked like he was really going to do it.
Yeah.
They were consistently, however, critical of the U.S. contribution to the United Nations,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, so what's the plan?
Well,
What's
the
the
plan
plan?
is
Everybody will come to New York and go to the building, but the United States is going to sit it out, right?
yeah, turn the UN into Disney World, and just a building, a museum, museum
There
the way
you
it
go.
used to be,
A
and
museum
then
to world peace.
yeah, and then world peas, WHIRLD,
Yeah,
world.
PIECE.
Yeah. Well, the world will be in pieces, and Russia
Yes,
will run roughshod
dude.
over Europe. That's what'll happen.
That's right.
And
You
so,
know, but
well,
the American public thinks that's okay. I mean, there's still a significant portion of the American public that is very isolationist, and they
yeah,
think that's okay. They have no idea how all of this stuff works, and we're so interdependent on so many fronts in so many ways, and the general public totally lacks that possible
yeah.
position of understanding. Just
Look,
completely lacking.
Dan, we haven't even touched global warming. We haven't even touched, what
Well,
Trump did.
global warming is touching us.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we didn't we haven't even thought or talked about how Trump took us off, the climate accords, and how we had to like get
Oh
back
yeah.
in, embarrassingly so, and how about COVID?
Oh man,
Banded I mean, you people want to say that the Trump presidency was
was
better.
better. Was
Oh
better.
my
I,
God.
I loved it when Elise Stefanik said, "I'm going to ask the question: were you better off 4 years ago?" And I thought, go ahead, ask the damn question, and I want to hear what what the answers are.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think we are better off. Look, it's like when you have a great ship like the United States fallen during the Trump years,
Yeah.
it takes a heck of a lot to right the ship. And now
Right.
we've righted the ship, or we've got it back up, and now we're going forward, and just getting the ship up from where Trump had it to where we are now, I think is a
A
tremendous.
major, yeah, it's a major accomplishment. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
And I
But
think if
but
you
but see, people don't feel it because they're looking at the price of gasoline. I have
well,
not ever since I saw one of the standard oil stations here locally in San Francisco, $7, and
wow,
ninety
seven.
cents, man. And
I
I
think,
thought
yeah,
that please say that's not so, and it scared the hell out of me. Luckily we have one of our cars is a hybrid.
uh,
I haven't driven the other two cars at all because they're big ass V8 Audis,
oh wow,
and gas
yeah,
guzzlers. But the the Toyota, the hybrid, I haven't taken it in for gas yet because I'm just scared to see. I got to check with Costco and see what their current price is, right?
yeah.
But
Well, I paid five. I mean, I think five is,
did you get it
it-
at Costco or did
no,
you
no.
go?
I just went to a regular. I'm in the land of the truck stops, and so
Sure.
uh, I can get cheap gas here, but
Yeah,
it's
you're off. You're near 99.
yeah,
99's got. Yeah, there's a lot of places where you can get good cheap gas.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so yeah, it was
that was
five is still a
it.
shot.
Eggs are back. Eggs are back. You can afford eggs again.
Yeah,
They're down. They're down to almost pre-COVID prices, but
yeah,
they're still having to kill birds,
yeah.
and
Oh,
it
hey, birds,
spread the
bird,
cows. It spread
and
the cows, but the milk is supposedly safe.
and don't forget bird flu.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That they were killing chickens, by the hundreds of thousands just a couple of months ago.
yeah,
So that could change again. But yeah, it's really bad. People are walking away from Starbucks. Finally, they're
yeah.
finally saying that 6.50 is too much for a cup of coffee. You know,
Uh,
I can't even imagine that, man. I mean, for us over here, that's half a custom burger. A
Yeah.
custom burger, a really nice custom burger with like mushrooms.
Custom burger. Oh man. I mean, well, I'm a vegetarian or vegan. I'm a
Sure.
vegan. Here's
Yeah,
what I've
well,
noticed.
we can go meatless.
Yeah.
Some of the meatless products, but they're expensive, right? The
Yeah.
meatless products are expensive.
Well, look, there's some meatless products aren't great. They've tried to make them better. Some of them have more sodium. Some of them have more
That's
fat.
the problem.
But
Is the salt.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you're true vegan, you I have a meatless patty maybe once every 6 months, if that. I mean,
What?
if you're a true vegan, you eat
Right.
vegetables. You eat beans, you eat rice, you go plant based. You eat salads, you eat soups, you eat stews, you eat couscous. Oh, couscous! You eat your couscous. Yeah, and I eat Israeli couscous. I eat Israeli couscous, and
How do you
that's the
know
thing.
it's Israeli? Is it packaged in Israel?
There's a special. They have little stars of David, and you have to take them out before you eat them. Otherwise, they'll get caught in your
What?
trachea. But no, but seriously, it's an Israeli couscous. I'm not kidding you. It's a bigger couscous, and it's delicious. You go to Amazon, you get your.
What do you mean bigger?
It's a little bigger, rounder
The
couscous.
thicker? Oh, the kernels. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or what do you call them? The kernels or
Rather
generals?
rather than creamy, right? Rather than creamy, it's
Well, couscous can be like little small, little things,
yeah,
or they can,
grains. Yeah,
like a pastis kind of thing, or they
yeah.
can be a big thing. And so the Israeli couscous is bigger, and it's delicious, and you get the wheat ones. Well, they're all made of bulgur wheat, I think, but it's delicious. So anyway, I noticed this because a place that we like to go to, we like to go to. I like to go to Greens in San Francisco.
Sure.
It's not the greatest restaurant now because there are other restaurants that are doing more interesting things on the vegan front, but it's solid, and it's not even vegan. It's more vegetarian. I just saw a bad review, or a lukewarm review that someone gave to Greens, and praising it more for its view than for its food. The food is it's look, it tends to be pricey, but I commend Greens for being there, and I love the fact that as a San Francisco vegan friendly vegetarian restaurant, it's there, and it's easy to say to friends, hey, let's go to Greens, because it's a great experience no matter what. No matter what.
I discovered by accident this vegan Chinese place
Yeah.
on Kearney Street,
Which
near the old I Hotel. Near
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah. You're
Yeah.
talking about Enjoy.
I don't know the name of the place. I just know where it
Ah,
is. It's
right
opposite.
across.
It's opposite the Middletown Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, yeah, but down the block further,
Yeah,
right? And,
towards
and
towards a little bit further towards Columbus. Yeah,
right, it's called Enjoy. That one, if it's the one I'm talking about, that I
I
know.
was really pleasantly surprised. I just
Oh,
I was coming from a meeting. I walked in front of it to get to the parking lot, right down at Ports Square, and I looked at the menu and I said, okay, let me try a couple of things.
yeah.
And see how they do. So I bought them takeout to share with family back home, and we were all well, the three of us were pleasantly surprised, very pleasantly surprised.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
It was
Hey,
amazing.
Dan, I've been going to Enjoy for like 10 years. I always wanted to take you to not necessarily I mean, that's a good place, but I wanted to take you to a slightly better place for all the other things that they have. And and I think Asian veganism, it's easy because Asians are vegan. I mean, Asians should be vegan. They use little portions of meat, and you can get rid of the meat easily. So I always think of Asian vegan food as generally easy. So the tough parts, or the tough cuisines, are the ones that are so meat centric, meat heavy. And I notice that some of these vegan restaurants are, they're going more Asian, or Latin, to try to keep it interesting. But when you come down to it, a good vegan meal is pretty basic: beans and rice. Now to get more money out of the consumer, that, that takes some creativity. Anyway, I don't know how we got into a discussion on veganism, but you're
Well, we were talking about food prices. We
oh,
started
food
talking
price.
about food
Oh,
prices
well,
and whether or not, yeah, yeah,
restaurants are pricey.
yeah. The well, everything costs more, and especially meat. So that's been going up and down. But that's what the general population, doesn't like, and that's among the other things. So, see, we've been focusing on why the younger voters are critical, and
Mhm.
Gaza, I think, is a major issue, but it is also a symptom. Okay, and I think it carries a lot of the anger, frustration that comes out of the younger generation's experience with increased costs for everything. I mean, they're feeling the pinch that the adult, well working, right, population also feel.
Mhm.
It's very strong,
Yeah.
and so SF State had suffered over past 30, 35 years a reduction in local population enrollment. Okay, we draw from about five of the local counties. Okay, but in those five counties there are two other state schools. There's CSU East Bay and obviously San Jose State.
Yeah.
So they draw more students than we do at this point, and for a long time. So we were doing heavy recruitment from Southern California. The problem is uh, that costs have gone so high in the San Francisco area for
Oh, so
everything,
you're losing
particularly
some
rent.
LA people? LA, it's cheaper in
Yeah,
LA? Wow.
so they're staying down in LA, and so they're have great enrollment at San Diego's schools and at LA schools.
Wow. It's funny because when I taught at SF State, I did notice there were a lot of LA type people there. And I was surprised that it was cheaper down in LA than in San Francisco. But when I saw some students having to live in cars and live in buses, I
Yeah,
mean, the housing is ridiculous.
it's primarily the housing.
Yeah, it's
There are
ridiculous.
other associated costs, but it's primarily the housing costs.
Well, I see, look, young people, there's nothing that depresses me more when I see a young person say, my life is over. I'm not going to get my dreams of it. They've got time. They have to realize that they have time and that they might be in a bad spot now because of where we are economically. But they've got time and they've got a way. And as long as they have their health, they can get out of whatever mess we're in now and see a better day. And there's no reason to be optimistic or no reason to be pessimistic. There's every reason to be optimistic. But I assure them that if they vote for Trump or enable a Trump presidency, it'll
It
be
ain't
hard.
going to get better. It's
Yeah,
going to get a hell of a lot worse.
it's going to be, and it's going to be hard on everybody, and that's
Yeah.
got to be the thing that people fear the most: a Trump, a second Trump presidency where there is really no guardrails. I mean, he knows how to do it. He knows how to put the screws on better,
Well,
and he will be
yeah.
vindictive.
Well, I think he's lost several steps. He's not as quick as he was in 2016, for
Mm.
sure. The thing is that he now knows that you can't call on traditional Republicans to back up his plan. He has to get people that are completely loyal to him and that are way off the charts in terms of right wing extremism,
Yeah,
that we can call at least uh, authoritarian, if not fascist.
yeah.
And he's got a bunch of those people in
Well,
mind. They've got a plan.
yeah.
They're going to fire off as many government employees as they can, federal employees as they can, and then put out a test
Yeah.
on simple question, right? Do you believe the 2016 election was or the 2020 election was stolen? I mean, that's
Hey,
what it's going to come down to.
it's just like getting the right Trump jury, right? We wanted a
Yeah,
fair Trump
that's
jury.
true.
And the question was, can you be impartial? Can you be fair? And then they got rid of all these people who said they couldn't. Well, Trump's going to do the same thing. It's going to be you want to be on the American jury, and he'll pose a question, and if you can't say you can be loyal to Trump, 100%, you're off, and but they'll have your email, they'll know where you are, and they'll know what to do with you. And that, see, this is the fear that uh, Trump needs. Trump runs everything based on his self-interest, and Trump wins when, this is my theory, Trump wins when your self-interest is aligned 100% with Trump's.
Well, when you believe your self interests are aligned with Trump's.
Yeah, well, when your self-interests are aligned with Trump's and everyone, that's the ideal world for Donald Trump. When
Sure,
you believe that his self-interest is beyond and over and your self-interests are like negated,
subordinate.
yeah, then you say, well, we need an alternative. How about those Democrats? Or if your self-interest, are, if you're close to Trump's self-interest, then you'll go with Trump. And that's why you see Elise Stefanik being as outrageously Republican radical as she is, or you'll see Marjorie Taylor Greene. And even there, she's like, she'd like to get rid of Johnson, but
Yeah,
her
yeah.
self-interests aren't aligned 100% with Trump's.
Well,
And
she's the kind of person who would definitely cut off Johnson.
oh yeah, yeah. And here's the thing, Johnson at least is, he's not great, but he understands that the Trump folks are kind
Well,
of kind of
yeah.
strange.
See, there's a lot of smart guys, right? There's a lot of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, a lot of really smart guys that made it, right, in terms of their academic credibility, right, and their professional credibility. Uh,
Mm,
they're licensed attorneys. I mean, it is not an easy thing to pass the bar
mm,
and do all that kind of stuff. So we know that they're intelligent people.
mm.
That to accept or answer rather to the question, why are they behaving the way they do? Why
It's their
still subscribe to, right? Well, if he's the Republican nominee, I'm going to support him, right? So they
no,
Trump stepped all over those guys, man. He questioned the appearance of Cruz's wife. He had the National Enquirer publish that front page article that said his father was in on the assassination of JFK.
yeah,
He was racist. Asians ought to keep that in mind, right? He was racist towards
oh yeah,
McConnell's wife,
yeah,
and she was a member of his friggin' administration. You
yeah.
know,
Cabinet level. So this is the thing. Trump is his self-interest. If you can live with his self-interest and you align yours with his, then you can vote for him. If not, and clearly it takes a special brand to say, yeah, my self-interests are aligned
no,
with
I
Trump.
don't think. See, here's where we're going to differ.
Yeah,
I kept saying believe. If they believe their self interests align with
believe.
Trump's, what reason I say that is that he has you're I agree with you that he's only interested in his own stuff, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, absolutely individually egomaniacal. Okay.
Mm,
However, his skill is an understanding where the mentality of a majority of Americans is at. Okay, and
mm,
so he plays to that segment of that majority that he thinks he can win to his side by simply telling them what they want to hear. They want to be affirmed, right? They want to be validated,
right.
and they
That's
want
smart.
to be uplifted in a sense, with a sense of hope that serves what he believes they think are their best interests. So he's a
Yes.
great salesman.
Yeah.
He is wonderful at marketing himself as a person who is going to do good things for those folks. So that's what they believe. They believe that he's actually going to do that stuff. Like,
And
like they believe that the Trump tax cuts helped them.
yeah.
They actually believe that.
And they don't. They helped the 1%, but they didn't help the 99.
It helps some of the 99, but
Yeah.
minimally, and we're talking about people at the lowest level of what we would call the working class and then on up to about maybe the middle class.
Right.
But for people in the upper middle and the upper middle class, man, we all ended up having to pay more taxes, man.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Trump was able to target certain people, but what you were saying about, he validates people. He does all this. What you're saying is exactly the model for another very famous talk show host, Oprah Winfrey. She validates people. She says, people need validation, and he validates you. So if
Well,
you're
yeah, but she moves them. She doesn't move them in a judgmental uh fashion, right?
right, she wants
He
everyone
doesn't
to
encourage them to become judgmental and self-seeking. She encourages them to offer be convivial and
Mhm.
congenial towards others.
Right,
When she makes
because
recommendations on books, they tend to be from the liberal side of things, right? Liberal perspective.
so
Uh,
the only one who could negate Donald Trump is if we have an all talk show election.
There
Trump,
have been
Oprah.
people who suggested that Oprah should be run for president
Well,
many times,
that
many
yes,
times.
yes. Oprah has always been there as an option. Then you heard people say, "Oh well, we need Michelle Obama," and now we're stuck with Biden. Not stuck. It's just that he's the guy. But incumbency is generally a good thing, and it might still be. It
If
just
people aren't
depends.
seeing it, people say he hasn't done anything. I mean that. Oh, one of the comments I was going to make about how news media has been covering all of this stuff.
Yeah,
Have you noticed that they seem to cover more concerns of the fears that Jewish students have on campus,
yeah.
and they have very little coverage of what
Okay.
the protesters' reasoning for what they're doing. They may get the call for divestment, right? But they don't get further into a real discussion of what the protesters' reasoning is.
Yeah,
Okay.
but also they don't talk to the protesters and get their side of the fear they have when they go into um, a situation and they meet pro-Israeli
What
folks.
are the risks? Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
They don't check to see whether or not they understand what the risks are.
well, it goes both ways. A person with a kafaya with
Yeah,
who goes in to a situation and they see they get called anti-Semitic when the real issue is just because you're protesting doesn't make you anti-Semitic. I
yeah.
mean, I think you pointed this out
Well,
last week.
I don't know, but you got a bipartisan bill
Yeah,
that is probably going to get approved. I think it passed the House and it's on its way up to the Senate, but it broadened the what falls under anti-Semitic. It broadened the category. Um, I don't think it defined it more clearly, but it just broadened it more.
yeah.
So
Oh,
that's actually really dangerous, right? And I
yeah,
think the thing that would follow after that is that on a local or state level, you're going to see states come up with punishments for anti-Semitism. That's going to be really interesting, don't you think? You
oh
know,
yeah, yeah.
because a
Well,
lot of the states that have been anti-Semitic historically,
mhm,
right? The Ku Klux Klan states, and that's about 30 states. People don't they think it's only about 12 states in the South. Man, there's KKK active in maybe 30 states, right? And
yeah,
maybe more, maybe 40 states, but they weren't necessarily KKK affiliate, right? But
yeah.
anyway,
Hey, Dan, let me ask you about uh, my latest Aldef column where I talk about how Arabs were
oh yeah,
Asian,
yeah.
but now then they were white, and now they really want their own group, the Middle Eastern North African group in the census, but that's going to take a long time. That you can't just change things in the census like that without
Well, it's
as
also it's also early.
it's
It's
early, right? So
2024, so they got you know they
yeah,
go, that's good though. I mean, they can work on it for 5 or 6 years, but they would know by, let's say, 2028
Yeah,
whether or not
right,
the change is possible. But they're
but
not going to get it. They're not going to get it if the Republicans are in either of the houses.
yeah,
You know,
because
if they, I'm sorry, if they have a majority of either of
yeah,
the houses. I mean, it
yeah.
doesn't even matter if there's a Democratic president or a Republican president. If there's a Republican president, for sure they're not going to get it.
All
Okay.
right, so that's the issue with Arabs right now. They want their own thing, but in the meantime, they're considered white, and they don't think of themselves as white enough because they face discrimination. They, there's anti-Arab, anti anti-Muslim, anti-Arab things. I mean, Islamophobia. They get hit by that.
Yeah.
So
It
my
doesn't make
question,
sense. White means Western. You
yeah,
know, that's what. If you want to go with the most general, right, kind of
yeah,
categorization, white is equated with Western, and so for Arab peoples and North African peoples to see themselves as Western is to see themselves as white, right? And so
yeah.
that's not gonna work.
Yeah, well, all
There
right.
are very light skinned Arabs, however,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
There,
Well, it,
I had blue eyed Persians. They called themselves Persians rather than Iraqi or Iranian,
right,
right? And
right,
I've
and
had green eyed Afghanis
yeah.
in
So
my classes.
let's broaden this to say that when we talk about Arabs, we're talking about all Turkic people. It includes Lebanon, Syria,
Yeah.
Iran,
Yeah.
Iraq. It includes Morocco, but it also includes Israel and Palestine.
That's true. That's true. The
And so,
Jordanians,
so
Lebanese. Yeah, you mentioned Lebanese, but Jordanians.
yeah.
You see the Queen of Jordan is going around making appearances on news shows and
Uh,
TV talk shows.
I
Yeah,
haven't. Yeah,
she's saying
I,
there's got to be a ceasefire.
yeah,
She's pushing for true negotiation, and
yeah,
she's also criticizing Israeli policy generally. What do you
yeah.
think of the Israelis now are criticizing uh, I guess students and faculty who teach the creation of Israel as a state, right? Uh, as an exercise in colonialism, that essentially Israel is a colonial state, and they're saying that's so ridiculous. They criticize that position. What do you think?
What do I think? Well,
Yeah,
what are they doing to the Palestinians? Who who are the
yeah.
colonized in this situation? If there's a presence of a colonized uh, people, then I think the definition fits, and I think they should be open to the fact that, well, what are you doing? Well,
They're acting like
how,
colonizers. Yes,
I mean,
yes.
so
But I
if
think their argument is all we have is we're returning to our original homeland, and then they're resisting the argument that you're not even real Israelis. You're not
uh,
because you're not Arab.
yeah,
Okay.
well, see, this is the thing. I don't I I I only wanted to bring up the issue because when we talk about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month, you know, I thought that it was about time that people understood
Asia
that,
Minor.
yeah, we should go Asia 360. You know,
Right.
Asia Central, Asia East, Asia South, Asia West,
See,
and Asia West. What the West Asians are these, Turkic people, Egyptian,
yeah.
Jordanian,
Yeah. Well,
Syrian.
I'm not offended by Asia West or West Asia. I was always kind of resistant to calling it Asia Minor, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of subordinating, right?
I
And
used to hear that. I've heard that before, but I just call it
well, it
West
was
Asia.
on the maps when we were
Yeah.
kids in
Oh yeah.
grammar school, or what used to be called grammar schools, now
Yeah.
elementary school. It was on the maps,
Well, but
all
this
the way
is
up
also
until the 60s.
this is the thing also about, like, I didn't realize the Arabs were considered Asian until I went to an Asian American journalism or journalist association convention, and all these, and it was in Dearborn, which was a perfect time to let people know that, yeah, Arabs are Asian too, and the reason why they, when people think of them as white, they say, well, we're not white.
No, man, I didn't even people. I didn't know people thought of them as white.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, here, if you go to my story on the Aldef blog, the story goes there was a Lebanese immigrant in 1900. He was a cop, and he arrested uh, the scion of a prominent attorney in L.A. And Daddy went to save the son and say, "Hey, you Lebanese cop, you're not eligible to be a citizen. You're not a citizen. This arrest is invalid." And the cop, this George Shishim, said, well, "Wait a minute. I know I'm Asian because of the categorization of where you put Lebanese, but I'm really white." And he went to court to fight it. He won the case. They decided that he was white because he said something like, "Hey, look, if I'm Asian, if I'm Mongolian, then Jesus is Asian." And then the judge said, "Okay, you're white," and he became a citizen on the spot. I don't know what it meant to the scion of the attorney, and whether or not the arrest stuck. But from that point on, Arabs have thought of themselves as white, and that case has been used by other states to determine the whiteness or the eligibility of Arabs to be citizens. And so this Shishim case, back in the turn of the 20th century, that was key. That's when Arabs saw themselves as white. But throughout the years, Arabs faced discrimination. Arabs faced all sorts of, their experience was more allied with people of color. And, ever since, like I said, my first Asian American Journalists Association convention in Detroit, we went to Dearborn. I met Arab journalists, and I said, "Yeah, you're our brothers and sisters." So I just wanted people to know that the term AANHPI, or Asian American, is far more diverse, far more inclusive than they think. It includes Arab Americans, it includes Israelis, it includes Palestinians, and maybe Asians are the way to bring all of us together. What do you think?
Wow, that was a reach, but I
Hey,
like it.
hey, I'm
It
trying.
was a reach, but I like it. I think it's plausible. See, well, as you were describing this,
Mm.
uh, Filipinos did the same thing.
Oh yeah,
In order to be able to marry white girls, right? Salvador Roldan
right.
went to court in L.A. In the 1930s and argued that he's not a Mongoloid.
Yeah,
He's a Malaysian. He's Malay, and a special kind of Malay because he's an Ilocano, and Ilocano's got a lot of Spanish blood. So we're not Mongolian. So here we have an Arab person of Arab descent arguing we're not Mongolian either.
yeah,
But he gets closer to being able to say we're white. Now there was also a Japanese immigrant who tried to claim right being white, and he lost. So we're all over the lot on this, right? It kind
yeah.
of depends on what year it was, what the historical and social context was, and what kind of court was sitting at the supreme level, or at least at the federal
It was
appellate level.
superior. Yeah, it was Superior Court decision that the Justice Department upheld. But you're right about the Roldan decision. I didn't want to bring in Roldan. I'll bring it in another time. But I'm glad you mentioned it now because yes, the Filipino said,
Everybody's done it.
yeah,
Everybody's tried to be more white. Out of an effort to realize a greater uh, degree and scope of rights and
or
privilege.
yes, that's, or they just wanted to be less discriminated against.
Yeah, like this was going to help, right?
Yeah.
the
Well, they
reaction, the reaction to the Roldan case was they said Malay is included. They added it to the list.
Yeah.
And they did everything but point at Rodin and say, "This means you."
Well, this is the thing. We needed the way to fight discrimination was to become white.
Yeah,
That was the idea.
yeah,
You become white. You fight discrimination by becoming white. But you know what? We realize you can fight discrimination by just saying I'm Filipino,
yeah, yeah.
and you can't discriminate against me.
Well, there were
That
other
worked
ways.
too, but we
More
didn't learn that
recently,
till later.
more recently, Filipino, I'll call them conservatives,
Mhm.
have said they tried to win the argument by saying we're not like those other people of color.
Oh,
So it's not quite. So we're not saying we're white, but we're saying we're as close to being white as you can be, and the furthest away from being black.
ah,
You
when
know,
when was this, Dan? When were these conservatives talking? Are you talking in the
oh
last?
my God, in the '80s when
Oh, the yeah, yeah,
Jesse Jackson ran. I mean, I leading Filipinos. Where I'm talking about people who actually were appointed to commissions
oh yeah. I
on
know.
the local and then the state level. So
I
they earned a level of not only representativeness for Filipinos, they also earned a level of recognition as politically competent, right? And then were appointed to major commissions, locally and statewide. And one or two of them were relatively conservative. In fact, at the time, one was definitely Republican,
yeah,
and he was saying to publicly, right? We're not here to make trouble like those other guys. You
yeah.
know, we're here to get along.
We're different. We're colonial.
I don't-
We're one of you guys. We're
yeah, I don't think that anybody comes out and self labels that way, but yeah, they
we're
they
the
they
yeah
describe themselves and they describe our community as being willing accomplices to whatever
right.
white people want to do.
We're little brown brother grown up. We're
It
adult
is
brown brother.
little brown.
Brown.
We willingly subordinate ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, see now that's the thing. Um, that's the thing. It was one thing when the Arabs and when the Roldan said, "Okay, we're going to be more white, or we're going to show that fighting discrimination by being white is the answer." But we've learned that fighting discrimination, just being Filipino,
Hmm.
that's the better way. That's the better way.
Yep.
So, well, so Dan, so there's the Shishim story, and the Arabs. I welcome the Arab brothers and sisters, and I think that even though you think it's a stretch, I think it does.
Oh, I
If
don't think it's a stretch. I think they definitely are Oriental.
yeah, yeah, well, that was the way of thinking, yeah. But no,
Hey, hey,
the point
yeah, all
is,
you got to do is look at those rugs, man. That's all
yeah,
you got to do, right
yeah,
there. They're
yeah,
Oriental rugs. The people are friggin' Asian. Okay,
yeah.
come on now.
Well,
That's
look,
a traditional point of reference.
yeah,
Let's do it.
and
Okay.
the thing
The
is,
other thing is, what do you know? I was. It's really interesting that the way people talk about language is that the large category is Indo-European languages.
Indo-European.
Yeah, Indo-European languages. And the
Not,
reason they had to do that,
indoor European. Oh, Indo-European.
Indo-European languages. So
Okay.
that's this huge category, right?
Uh-huh.
And I understood, yeah, even in high school, because when we were doing world history, they said Indo-European languages that there were so many European languages where the basic concepts clearly originated from Sanskrit. Okay, so that
Ah,
there's
yeah.
this Sanskritic influence on everything. I mean, look at the
Indo.
adaptation, or the adoption rather of the swastika, by Adolf Hitler, right, as a
Yeah.
symbol, the
Yeah.
Nazi symbol, and it's an actually old Sanskritic symbol, right? It's
Uh,
thousands of years old. So that relationship is there. I was always uncomfortable though with that
why?
because the implication is that if it's Indo-European, um, that there is an actual understanding by Westerners, by Europeans,
Mhm.
that much of their the evolutions of their culture is actually rooted right in Asia.
Mhm.
So that's the we don't get that kind of we don't get that kind of respect, man. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Well, it's
you know?
true. Well, I just wanted to bring up this idea that it's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we should be all inclusive, and maybe through us, uh, our Asianness, we can bring the world together, and we can end the disputes.
Yeah, well, we should be inviting Arab people to join in
Oh yeah,
on our celebrations.
Arab
And say,
people,
okay, let's
Arab
do it.
people, Jews too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Israel.
Well, see, this is the problem that I had way back when they said they were going to call the first school of ethnic studies rather than third world studies.
Mhm.
And people say, why do you have such a problem with that? And I said, because Jews are ethnic too.
Yeah.
They,
So,
they they're definitely excluded, right? They're definitely the victims of prejudice and racism at the hands of Westerners, of Europeans,
so, so I know the initial
and the
attempt was to
Brits.
say third world studies, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's what we thought we were establishing.
But that was rejected.
I don't know. See, Gary Okahiro, professor at Columbia by happenstance. Well, not happenstance for him. I mean, obviously, he's a well-known professor and he's written a lot, particularly about relationships between Asian peoples and majority American society and
Mhm.
global relationships, but particularly concepts around ethnicity and identity, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
He's actually a trained Africanist, but he's also one of the original Asian Americanists. Came out of that period. He's about the same age as me. I don't know. I got to check to see whether or not he's still teaching at Columbia at the moment. But
Yeah.
but he researched the hell out of it. He spent a lot of time at SF State trying to locate specifically when third world studies was dropped and ethnic studies was replaced. It was replaced by ethnic study as the nomenclature of the school. So and he couldn't find it. So it was there was no moment, right, and no clear exercise of authority on somebody's part. It
So
just happened, and
maybe it
people
was
accepted it.
maybe it was just a phrase. When you say third world studies, it just seems not. I don't know. Versus ethnic studies,
Yeah,
that seems more
ethnic
academic.
studies is easy to say. Third world studies, doesn't roll off the tongue,
Well, also third world studies sounds more political
and that's
than
what we intended.
yeah. And
That's
so
exactly what we intended,
and
and
so
that's
it's
why it was denied.
and it's unfortunate though.
But it wasn't just. That's exactly why it was denied, in my opinion. But there
Yeah.
is no statement or exercise of authority that we can point at that rationalizes why third world was rejected. Now, it
So
may exist. It may exist somewhere
but
in the records of the trustees.
yeah, but that was your the group was called the Third World Liberation Front, right?
Correct. At
And
here at SF State as well as at Berkeley.
yeah. And then it ended up as ethnic studies. Well anyway, I wanted to bring up the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander thing and maybe at your next Olympia party or the next gathering you will invite some Arabs and some Jews, and we'll bring. It'll be one big. It's one big happy family, right?
Yep, yep.
One big happy
We
family.
got a we got some input here on the chat from. Do you see that from Malloy Malloy?
Yeah, yeah. I see it.
That's interesting. I'm going to check it out.
All
Thank
right,
you for that.
all right. So, and people are always welcome to chat. Put it in the chat if you find us on Facebook or you find us on Emil Guillermo.media on
Our
Facebook.
if we I share your our discussions on my channels, right, on Facebook and
Great.
X.
Yeah.
Do they get to see Malloy's comments here, or
I don't think so. I don't think. I
okay?
think
Well,
the
then I'm going to read it out.
Well, no, I think they can see it if they come to our.
If they watch it with us,
Yeah,
yeah,
and but they'll see it, and then that's you
that's
know
interesting.
yeah.
And I want to check it out.
Okay, so all right, Dan. My God, look, we haven't solved the world's problems.
Yeah,
And
that's because everybody's resistant.
yeah,
If they would just listen to us, love the logic,
yeah,
listen to Malloy, and read up, they would get it.
yeah.
But
All right, so I this morning the Hope Hicks was on the Trump trial. Let's just give a little mention to the Trump trial because I think it's important, but we're not at that point where everyone must watch. You should watch, but it's not a must watch yet. But I think so far, a lot of people have been talking about, okay, well, if the documents were faked, all right, that's just a misdemeanor. You got to link it to the campaign, uh, the campaign, and then suddenly it's a felony. I think David Pecker did that. He linked it to the
yeah,
campaign,
yeah,
and so I think I think that was a strong opening, but and Hope Hicks it only shows that well Trump knew about this. He wasn't in the dark. I think we're maybe it's levels of evidence or how in terms of persuasion.
it's called chain of evidence.
Yeah, but I
You have
think
to.
that we're
That's
there.
what they have to establish. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that I I'd be a good juror because I'd say, all right, done. We got there. They've proven to me that.
yeah, yeah.
What
I
more do
think
they have to prove?
they still need Cohen, and I'm just curious to see if Cohen can keep his composure
Mhm.
when he faces cross examination.
Because
But
he can hurt himself. He can hurt himself, right?
he could, and then the question is, does he hurt the prosecution, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're establishing the chain of evidence. I think they could use maybe one or two more people, especially when they're like Hope Hicks, loyal to Trump. And
Well, that's the important
but
thing. If you get someone who's a Republican, who's loyal to Trump, and they're saying all these things about
that's
him,
right. That's right.
but the only way they can get that is by giving them immunity,
There you
right?
go. There you go.
You can't be prosecuted, so you think on this guy.
So, well, do you think that there's a possibility that there's at least one person on the jury that would be willing to say, not quite there?
Oh yeah,
These people are not believable because they got something. The immunity
I think
issue
I,
is theirs, and that they're in the back pocket of the prosecution, so we can't
I
trust her.
I think that's also the problem with Cohen. People are going to say, "Oh well, Cohen is,
He's a dirty bird. He's a nasty guy.
yeah."
And
So
Hope Hicks said that. Hope Hicks said this guy was not Mr. Generosity.
well,
He
the
was
same thing can be said about Trump. If you say that one lies once and one lies forever, or, whatever the phrase is, well, you can apply it to Cohen. You can apply it to Trump. I mean that's why that easy maxim isn't always. You got to listen and you got to weigh and evaluate. But I think that if if the jury were out now and said go make a decision now, could they do it?
yeah.
Or you need
I
one
think they
one or
could. I
two.
think there's for a logical, objective person. I think they've got it. They've got what they need. I just want the prosecution to bolster their arguments
Yeah,
a little bit more.
nothing like
There
a
may be a
little
couple of
overkill.
surprise. I'm hoping there's a couple of surprise witnesses.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Nothing.
it's I want to see more direct linkage, right, of Trump. Um, the defense succeeded
Mm,
in keeping recordings out where Trump's actual voice
mm,
is being showing that he knows that this stuff was going on.
Yeah.
It may not prove that he gave the order or wanted this to happen, but it shows that he knew it was going on, and that's enough. That's
Yeah.
enough to satisfy conspiracy.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an active participant in whatever the underlying crime happens to be, right?
All right. So,
But
all right, let's hope for overkill, and so that if there's any kind of deterioration of the logic, the people say, well, at least we got this. Oh yeah, okay, let's convict. But you're right, Dan, about is there a holdout? You got two lawyers on this, uh,
yeah, yeah,
on this jury. I just think I can see it. You got Upper East Side folks out there in the law. I can see they might say, "Oh, Cohen, he's not good," and oh, let's see how direct they can pin it on Trump. Oh, there's a reasonable doubt. What's reasonable? Reasonable for a conservative, or reasonable for a Manhattan Democrat.
yeah.
A lot of look. The biggest surprise for me in the trial is that there's another guy named Emil, and he's representing Trump. Oh my God, Emil Beauvais.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Emil Bove. So he's representing Trump. Um, I a lot has been talked about Trump's demeanor and his look, and Lawrence O'Donnell commented how the MSNBC guy, a distant friend of mine, he commented how Trump looks small, and Larry's a tall guy. Trump was taller than Larry, and said Trump was the tallest guy in the courtroom, but somehow when he sat down, the way he slunked, slunk
Yeah,
down,
he does slouch. He
he
slouches.
slouches, and he looks small, and he looks. I was thinking about this as I looked at all the pictures, not just the court drawings, but the pictures. Trump looks like a loser. What do you think?
He does. He does. Um, One of the at least
Oh, you froze. Oh, Dan. Oh, go get good. Dan.
at least one
Well,
of
you,
the dismissed jurors also described him as surprisingly small. That he was just normal, and by that saying normal, right? It was he didn't look like a great figure. Somebody he wasn't impressive, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so I think to me he looks most impressive when he looks really angry, like when and he tries to look really angry in a lot of the photographs, right?
Now, I think he looks impressive when he's coming out to "You can't always get what you want," and he's clapping his hands. That's Trump's. That's his good look.
He's
But he looks terrible in court. I think he looks
Yeah,
terrible in court.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think he.
Well, and my understanding is he smells worse.
Oh well,
Yeah.
well, as they say, that depends.
It reminds me of Mork from Mork. When in
Yeah,
the closing moments of his of William's show, where he would say he would refer to the person as your whiteness or something like that, and
yeah.
so in Trump's case, it would be your flatulence. You know.
Your flatulence. Your high flatulence or low flatulence.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
That's really gross, man. I
well,
think,
I think we ought to leave it right there.
yeah,
Dan, Dan. Always
yeah.
good talking to you.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. So how long? We'll close on this. How long do you think the trial's going to go before they
Oh,
close?
they say it's going to be 6 weeks. I think we could have a verdict, but sometime in July in the summertime. Don't you think? Maybe. Hey, how about this?
Yeah, I'm thinking we could have a verdict in June, but
All right, I like
now
that.
now
You know
here's the
why?
problem. Yeah, but here's the problem. He's going to appeal, and so it'll go to the federal appellate level,
Oh yeah.
and then depending on what they do, the Supreme Court could actually say no, we'll take it from here. They can
Uh,
actually reach down, grab the case from the appellate level, and take it on.
but even at the appellate level, then he can appeal again to the Supreme Court. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I
So
mean,
that would be what he would prefer,
yeah.
right? Is because then it would eat up some more time, right?
But look, an initial conviction in June would be perfect because June is his birthday. June 4th
Woohoo!
is his birthday. So let's hope for a happy birthday, Donald Trump. You're convicted. And then he can do the appellate stuff. But I think that would be a happy June. And then July, August, September, the October surprise will be the Supreme Court letting,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
that's the problem.
and then there will be riots in the streets.
Yep, yep.
Maybe, maybe.
Either way, the thing that is, I think, interesting is that people in the center and on the left are
Mm,
fearful of right extremism, violence coming from the right.
yeah.
But nobody's talking about the possibility that there could be violence coming from the middle, the middle, and the left, and
Yeah.
because there could be, depending on how the election goes,
I
depending
mean,
on what people do.
yeah. I,
We just once you, it's like having a gun, right? Once you pull the trigger and you let a bullet out, that bullet is going to continue to fly
till it
until
hits
it
them.
destroys something or loses its power.
Yeah.
That's it. And we're at the point where American society has let go of a whole load of buckshot, and it's flying, and it all comes down to what it hits.
Yeah.
How's
That
it going to hit?
I'm really anti-gun, and so and the analogy, but I understand the analogy. Maybe the middle gets mad. Maybe the middle gets angry. The middle should just vote and bring their friends and register and all that, because that's the way you maintain peace and get the change you want or get the meaningful change. Oh well, meaningful. What's meaningful? We vote, we win, then we lose again, then we win, then we lose again, then we win. That's democracy, right? It's not like you know.
Yeah,
Although it should be more, but it's
that's
well,
what it is. Because
yeah,
that's the risk. That's
yeah.
the risk. But the reason that the oscillation, right, has happened,
Oscillation, yeah,
yeah, that's an oscillation, has happened, and that the highs and lows are more extreme. There's a greater degree of divergence,
hmm.
is largely because of the behavior of the right over the last 35 years.
Oh, I'd say yes. I'd say you're right. You're right about that. You're right about that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's always the right. Well,
Well,
not always the right.
not
Sometimes,
always, but
yeah.
it has been because of actions of the right, and a lot of people are saying that uh, the actions of the pro civil rights, anti Vietnam War radicals and protesters of the late 60s and into the 70s
Mm.
actually handed the election, those two elections, to Nixon.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And
I can
so
see.
people are saying that the parallel now is that these protesters on the Gaza issue are handing the election to Trump.
I can see that. I was selling George McGovern T-shirts, um, and
Recently,
not
recently,
recently, but back in '72. Oh,
yeah, yeah.
what a shock! What a shock to see every place except Massachusetts. Every place go. It's a landslide, right, for Nixon.
Oh yeah, no, it was
That was
McGovern was not that strong a candidate. He was philosophically and in terms of political competence, he was good.
yeah.
He could have been a good president,
It was
but
better
he
than
was not
McCarthy.
a great communicator. He was a lousy candidate. He was not a great candidate.
Well, I think I'd agree with you. I once bumped into him on the streets in Washington D.C. He was not a candidate. It was in the '80s, but
Right.
yeah, boy, a lot of people put their stock in McGovern over. I mean, he was like the heir to Bobby Kennedy, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
In terms of support, Eugene McCarthy was really more the heir, but then McGovern beat out McCarthy, and McGovern was a good man. He was a
Yeah, yeah,
decent
he's a good
man.
man. He was
He's a,
definitely a good man.
and that's what people are saying about Biden. Although I've heard some people say, "Oh, Biden has a mean streak," but what people say about Biden generally is, "Oh, he's a good man, decent man. He was a decent
Yeah,
man."
no, he is. He
So,
is.
but
I thought my big disappointment was Mondale.
oh,
Right.
Mondale,
Uh,
yeah.
he was capable and all the rest of that stuff. His history on the Senate was really good, but he again was a horrible candidate. I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, uh,
Minnesota.
yeah,
But young Democrats at the time remember Eleanor Mondale, his daughter.
right, right,
That
right.
was that was his plus side. Did you bring Eleanor? Oh no, she's off on a date or something. But anyway, all right. So Dan,
All right, let's
let's
close it
cross
off.
our
Yeah,
fingers.
well, we went a long time here.
Yeah, I know. So we're off. We're off. Kentucky Derby this weekend. Are you watching the Kentucky? I hope you're not. Are
No,
you?
I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
good,
not.
good.
I
Because
like,
it's
I
terrible.
love horses,
Yeah.
and I'm real good around them, and I really now have built up quite a high level of resentment and condemnation of horse racing.
Hey, and thank goodness, I like horses. I used to bet on them. I won a lot of money on them, but now I realize what a terrible game it is, and
Yeah,
how rigged
it's really
what a
bad.
rigged game.
Yeah,
When when you knowingly put money on a horse that everyone but you knows has no chance of winning because it's lame, it's on drugs, it's being propped up to run a race. That is not. That's a rigged game, and we have a rigged game. If everything was fair and the horses were not hurt, the horses were not abused, if there was no cruelty, although it's hard to imagine there would be no cruelty in
at
a
this
sport like
point,
horse
yeah.
racing. Yeah, so I'm done with horse racing. I now only no, I don't bet on sports. I was going to say I only bet on the NBA, but no, I don't even do that. I only bet on football. No, I don't even do that. I don't bet at all. Betting is a
No, no
bad.
gambling at all. I mean, you can walk right past that craps table.
Okay. I might put something on a 68 or something like that. But I don't gamble. I gamble very rarely now. I used to
Yeah,
gamble a lot because now I realize that I gamble on myself. I put the money in myself. I say I'm going to the Orlando Fringe Festival, and I'm going to be there on May 16th. And if you're in Orlando, you should go. Go to atix. Go to a.tixlink.co/amok. You can see it on the screen. A.tixlink, TIXLINK.co/amok. And you can read up all about Emil Amok.
yeah, boy, you've been having quite a bit of success on the fringies, man.
Well, thank
That's
you.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It's just it's just a success to be there and to do your show. I enjoy doing my show. I take my commentary that I do here and that I do in the written page, and then I just put it in a narrative in a show. It takes an hour. It's funny in parts. The history gets a little look. The good thing about the history part of the show, you will not be tested. There will be no test, and but you'll get information. So we front load the entertainment. You get the laughs, the dancing girls. You get we show a little skin, at that front, and then we have a little history part, and then we
Wait a
have
minute. There's frontal nakedness in your shows?
well, it's in the front. The we're directing our attention to the front, but people
All right.
have to see. People will have to see, and then
Okay.
we have a little. We talk about it's three generations of Emil Amok. So it's at Orlando, the Orlando Fringe. So go to a.tixlink.co/amok and you'll read up about it and get your tickets. And there's a day when the tickets are really cheap.
There's a given day, and you can
Yeah,
tell.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can see, yeah. They
And
don't spring it on you by surprise.
yeah,
Like,
tickets are cheap. Yeah, it's not like a surge pricing kind of thing,
right,
or
right.
an
Oh
anti.
man, that ticked me off. Don't remind me. I remember
I know.
jumping
Yeah.
in an Uber in New York, and it was surge pricing, and I
Oh, I
said,
hate.
"What? You know,
I
like we only had to go a mile, and it was like $45, right? I
oh
said
man,
no.
that's terrible.
I jumped out of the car, and right behind him was a yellow cab, and we jumped in the yellow cab, and it was like $7, right?
Yeah,
To get,
I hate
to get
surge pricing.
yeah, it was yeah.
Surge
That
pricing.
ticked me off, but it
It's
was
the
a good
worst.
lesson, and we didn't have to pay it because we jumped out of the damn car.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
Kathy Guillermo, somebody that interestingly has your last
Oh
name.
yeah. What did she
She
say?
gave me a bravo. Well, I think
Oh,
it was
bravo.
about my condemning horse racing. Yeah, yeah,
I
we
think
got to
it
we
was.
got to condemn them all. Horse. I don't know. How about stuff like turtle racing? Remember they used to do turtle racing in.
Any form of entertainment with an animal is bad. Any
Okay,
form,
okay.
except for a Filipino at the Orlando Fringe, but any form of animal entertainment is bad. And that circus, the circus bad.
Well, circus is bad.
Rodeo bad. Rodeo's bad. I mean, they're all bad. But anyway, the Kentucky Derby is coming up on Saturday, and I just want people, if they want to see cruelty, they'll see the race, and really the question is there going to be a breakdown? Is there a
Yeah,
horse,
right.
gonna, and not just at the Kentucky Derby, but all the races that day in Kentucky at Churchill Downs? Will there be a breakdown? I mean, because usually there are, and
Yep.
there have been in the past. This year, I haven't seen many breakdowns reported, but they did ban Bob Baffert, who is this Hall of Fame cheater.
No,
Uh,
yeah,
from,
really notorious. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
All
well,
right.
Dan, thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for
No, you
all.
brought it up, and you asked whether or not I was going to watch, and I condemned it and said that I'm really heavily against it.
Yeah, well,
Any kind of racing.
and thank you.
I do. The turtle races are kind of cute though, and the people aren't
Turtle.
loading them up on
No,
steroids.
no,
They're not loading turtles up on steroids, for God's sake.
no turtle races. No turtle races. Okay.
Okay.
All right, Dan. Dan, we'll have to talk about that.
How about
All right.
insects? We can do insects.
No. All right, Dan. Dan, thanks. Hey. Did you know our friend Rex Navarrete is up in? I think he's at the Punchline in Sacramento on the 5th.
5th of May on
5th of May.
Sunday.
I think he's there on Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah,
Check
yeah.
that out.
Yeah. I wonder if he's going to do his Chicano jokes.
I don't know. I haven't seen Rex in a couple
He
years,
can do his yeah,
but
yeah.
I like
He can
Rex.
do some Cinco de Mayo jokes and see if that flies.
Oh, that's right. He's there for Cinco de Mayo, so he's probably going to do some Cinco de Mayo jokes. Okay, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think
Okay.
I'm going to get
Okay.
up. All right,
Okay.
Dan.
Good afternoon to Malloy too. We'll check
All right,
you out, Mr. Malloy.
all
He
right,
puts the
Daniel.
skull on there. He wants to meet us in
Yeah.
person.
All
I
right,
don't
great.
know.
We
Yeah.
can
Bring
arrange
your
it.
magnetometer.
All right, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, my friend, College of Ethics Studies, San Francisco State University. There he goes. He left. He jumped out of the screen. Professor Emeritus, Asian American Studies. I always like to talk to Dan because Dan makes sense. Makes sense out of this whole thing. We didn't solve any problems of the world, but we talked about how maybe they should have listened to us last week in our show 681, where we talked about, or when I talked about Dan talking about how they should talk. People should talk to each other. But they didn't talk at Columbia. Columbia failed the democracy test, and now we got this global situation all over the world. All right, boy, we went on. I like talking to Dan. Dan, good friend. I like talking to Dan. So we started the show talking about Stefan, and I still want to mention how my heart, even though I'm lighthearted now, it's been 10 years since Stefan died, killed, murdered. Really, he's wearing his giant shirt. He lived in the South of Market. Go back and repeat the show at the beginning, and I talk about Stefan and why he's important to think about now. It has to do with the homicide law. You can kill someone Even by accident, you can kill someone by accident, and it's legal. It doesn't matter if you're wrong. It doesn't matter if someone enters and it's a friend or it's a relative. If you shoot and you believe an intruder has entered, if you believe an intruder has entered, it's not an accident. It's a legal murder. And what gets me is no one is smart enough or courageous enough to challenge the law, because the man who shot my cousin should have at least faced manslaughter charge. Not even manslaughter. We didn't get Filipino slaughter. We didn't get anything. It's been 10 years though. And in the 10 years, I've meditated, and I'm just sad. I used to be angry and sad. Now I'm just sad. And now, and I'm not really, I'm sad, but I'm also more, I'm trying to be positive. But I tell the story because if people know the story of Stephen Guillermo, they'll know that this kind of pain exists, and it needs a solution. It needs to be solved, but no one has the political will to solve it. So this weekend I'll be thinking about Stephen. Thinking about Stephen and what we lost, because he lost his life May 3rd, 2014. So, yeah, sad. But I never forget Stephen. And if you go to my social media posts, you always see justice for Stephen. I keep that on as a kind of a reminder so we never forget. And I always remember Stephen. I always think about him, but especially on the day of, because it's a reflective time. Reflective time for me. And I'll talk about it more next week. All right. All right. Swish out. For those of you who are interested, as I said, we have this little thing called, there it is. If you go to amok.com, you can see Emil, Amok, Los NPR host, Wiley Filipino Vegan Trans Dad. Go see the poster for Orlando. There are the dates in Orlando. Look at the dates. May 16th, I'll be there. All the different times. Get your tickets now. Go to that link and get your tickets. And it's a good show. 3 generations. 3 generations. And I'll read through a review next week. Okay, so check it out. We swish out. Hey, thank you for joining us. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific live, if we can. Sometimes we're late. Sometimes we just repeat the show and catch it if you can. Secret podcast. Thinking about moving it to our podcast, Emil and Amok's Takeout, in the podcast form, since I haven't updated that for some time. And maybe we just do it. Put the show, one show in there. I think I'll do that. In the meantime, we like to end our shows with a little loving kindness. What better time to have a little sense of loving kindness? And so, put out the love. It comes back twofold. So as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time.